Hi, this is part 6 of a practical guide for teaching distance learning via Tandberg. And here we're going to talk about some examples of using that presentation mode that we talked about in part 5. So the options that you have for presentation mode are going to depend on what is currently on the screens. And we're going to consider several options in order to get a feel for how this works. Now this can be a little bit counterintuitive, but it might be frustrating, but once you get the hang of it, it's super easy, and it's very, very good for engaging the students on the far end. Okay, so here's example 1. If the presentation mode is not activated and the instructor camera is currently on the screens, the TV screens in each room, that is the near end and the far end, are going to be like this. You're going to have the instructor on one screen and the students, that is the far end students, on the other screen. So this is what you're looking at, and this is the same in both classrooms. Now, when you turn on the presentation mode, that is, if you press that home button over to presentation mode, if you currently have the instructor on the screen, then you're going to be given the options for secondary camera and PC on, that is the computer, on your presentation mode. So say that you wanted to turn on secondary camera. If you selected that, what's going to happen is the student camera here on the far end is going to be replaced by the secondary camera, which might be, usually it's the visualizer or the document camera. On the near end, the instructor camera is going to be replaced by the secondary camera. Now, think about it. This is actually good. There's no reason for the students on the near end to see a video or a screen that has you on it, right? They see you in person. They don't need to see you in a screen. So using the presentation mode in this way has basically replaced something that they don't need to see with whatever that they do need to see. And of course, on the far end, now you're able to, say, work a problem or do an example on the visualizer or the document camera, and then they can actually see you explaining as well, so they can see what you're doing there. So this is probably what I use the most with the presentation mode. Now, if you wanted to turn on the computer instead, like if you're going to show a PowerPoint or if you're going to show a video from YouTube or whatever, you simply select PC and it does the same thing. It replaces what they were seeing themselves by the computer, and it replaces whatever, what was the camera that was pointed on you with the computer. Okay, second example. Suppose that you want the computer on one screen and then something else on the other. So that is, if the computer is currently being shown on one screen, and here of course we're looking at the students on the far end. Now when you turn on that presentation mode, now when you click on that, notice that the options it gives you for the presentation mode are now the main camera and the secondary camera. This is different because now it's the computers that is kind of the main source, or it's what's on the screen currently. So if you want to now put the main camera on your presentation mode, then you would just click on that, and what it would do is it would take away these things and replace them by the instructor. Now, notice this is kind of a weird example. Why would you want to do this? On the far end, it's looking good because they're looking at you on one camera and they're looking at the computer on the other camera. However, on the near end, you don't have what you're looking for. That is, you have the far end source, which is the students, but you have the instructor camera on. Well, the students on the near end don't need to see you on the screen. They need to see the computer. And so this is something that you would probably never do, but it's something that the system can do if you want it to. The same thing would happen if you selected the secondary camera. It would replace what was there with the secondary camera. Yeah, so in this case, this would actually kind of be useful. One of the things to notice is that the students on the near end will be seeing the secondary camera. That is, they'll be seeing the document camera or whatever, but on the far end, they're also seeing the computer. The problem is here on the near end, they can only see one at a time. So they're only able to see the secondary camera. They can't see the computer. So if you have a problem or an example on the computer and you want to work on it on the document camera, well, you can do that on the far end, but on the near end, it's not going to work. At least not the way you kind of want it to. Okay, example number 3. Suppose that you currently have the document camera, the visualizer, on one screen. When you click on the presentation mode, the options that you're going to be given are the main camera and the PC. So of course, if you selected the main camera, these things would go away and be replaced by the instructor, which is the main camera. Once again, on the near end, this is kind of useless, and on the far end, it's actually okay. If you turned on the PC in this, now what you have is that you have the computer and the document camera on the far end, but on the near end, it's only what you had in presentation mode. So they're not seeing what you're doing on the document camera here on the near end. Okay, one more example. Why not? Suppose that you have the student camera on. So that is, you have the camera that's pointed at the students that are on the near end. If you turn on presentation mode, the options that you're going to be given are the main camera and the PC. So if you selected the main camera, of course, those go away, and they're replaced by the main camera or the instructor. If you press the PC, they're just replaced by what's on the computer. So basically what happens is this. On the far end, once the presentation mode is selected, that source will replace the far end source, which is the student's camera that's looking at themselves. And that means that they're no longer going to be looking at themselves. In the near end classroom, the presentation mode will be on one screen and the far end source will be on the other. So that is, the presentation mode actually replaces what is on the current screen or what is currently selected on the near end. So here is a cool tip. This is my tip number 5. You can see what the students on the far end are looking at by looking at the screens in the far end source camera. I do this all the time. If I want to make sure that they're looking at the right thing, what you do is you look at the screen in your classroom that's pointed at the students on the other end, and you look beyond them to the screens that are in the back. In the classroom, the screens are always mirrored. In other words, they're looking at exactly what you're looking at back here. So what I can see in this is that, okay, great. I know that one thing is on the document camera and the other is on the far end source. That is, presentation mode has not been activated. And so this is kind of allowing me to see what they're looking at on the far end. So this is a really cool tip, that you can see the screens through the screen that's pointed at their end. And it's a good way to double check and make sure that everything is the way you want it to be on their end. All right, and that's it for part 6. Thanks for watching.